Now that you have all become masters of modeling integers separately, we're now going to take a look at how can we put this into practice when solving problems. Because y'all knew it wasn't going to be as simple this year as, hey, draw pictures to represent this number. Draw a picture to represent this number. We actually got to put this into practice and solve some problems with it. So the first one we're going to look at is using symbols. Just to remind you, every time we see a positive number, we draw a plus symbol, and every time we draw a negative number, we draw a minus symbol. The important thing to note is that the minus symbol needs to be below the plus symbols. And we'll see why in a minute. So starting off with the plus symbols and the minus symbols, we see 2 plus 5. We know to represent 2, we draw 2 pluses. And if you're doing this in different colors and you need to indicate what color's what, that's fine. Now to do 5, we draw 5 plus signs. Because it's all the same sign and it's all positive, they all get to go beside each other. Then when we look at it, we notice that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus signs. Therefore, the answer is positive 7. I know that y'all are very intelligent young ladies and young gentlemen, and therefore you didn't need to draw pictures to show 2 plus 5 is 7. But what this is going to do is it's going to help us get into the habit of how to draw it, and it's going to train us how to do it so that when we do a problem that maybe we don't know the answer to, we can think through it and understand the symbols, and that's not going to be what trips us up. Now let's take a look at negative 2 plus 5. So we're going to draw 2 negatives, 1, 2. And now we need to draw 5 positives. Once again, remember that the negatives go below the positives. So we're going to draw 5 positives. And the first 2 of the 5 go directly above the negative symbol. And then we have those. Now, when we have a positive and a negative together, we are going to circle that. And you'll note that, hey, we can do it twice. And the reason we circle that is because a positive and a negative together are going to represent 0. Look what happens when you circle it. It's a 0. We call those 0 pairs. And so the reason for that is if I have a positive one and I put it with a negative one, they're opposites. And therefore they're going to 0 each other out. They're going to cancel each other out. Now let's take a look at what we have left. When we look at it, we should note that we have 3 positives remaining. Therefore, the answer to negative 2 plus 5 is positive 3. Let's take a look at 2 plus negative 5. So we have 2 positives, 2 plus signs, and then we have 5 negatives. Remember that the negatives go directly below the plus signs. So we put 2 minuses below the plus signs, and then we finish out our 5 negatives. And we make our 0 pairs. 0 pairs, once again, are when you have a positive and a negative together. They cancel each other out. They 0 each other out. They're a 0 pair. We look at what do we have left, and we have 3 negatives left. Therefore, the answer is negative 3. Take a look at the second example and the third example. The difference was where the negative was. That determined the sign of the answer. That determined, am I going to have more pluses left or more minuses left? So you can think about this somewhat logically. With the negative 2 plus 5, well, we had more positives, so of course it was a positive number. For 2 plus negative 5, of course we have more negatives, so of course the answer is going to be negative. Makes it a little easier to think about it and think through it that way. The other thing to note is that when they wrote this part of the problem, you'll notice the parentheses around the negative 5. Anytime that they have a plus sign with the negative, we like to put parentheses in because we think that 2 plus negative 5 looks funny. It just looks funny to have the plus negative without the parentheses, so when we put the parentheses in, it tends to look a little better. All right, on to the fourth example, negative 2 plus negative 5. So we have 2 negatives, and then we have 5 more negatives. They need to go beside because they're the same sign. And we take a look at this and we go, hey, I have 7 negatives. So the answer to negative 2 plus negative 5 is negative 7. Once again, the reason for the parentheses is not to tell us do order of operations. It's because without them, negative 2 plus negative 5 looks really funny and it's hard for us to kind of wrap our brains around it. Now let's take a look at the next modeling method. Heaps and holes. Again, this is the one that your parents probably looked at you really crazy when you came home talking about it, because I know that's exactly what you did. You went home and you told everybody, hey, guess what I did in math today? I drew pluses and minuses and heaps and holes, and then I got to draw number lines. So let's take a look at heaps and holes. Let's refresh it. You draw a horizontal number line. For every positive number, a semicircle goes above the line. For every negative number, a semicircle goes below the line. And then again, we're going to be able to represent 0 pairs, but we'll get to that in a minute. So we all know 4 plus 3 is 7. That's because you guys are so smart. But easiest way to show the modeling method is to use a problem that we all know the answer to. For 4 plus 3, we start with our 4 heaps. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're adding 3 more. 1, 2, 3. When we look at it, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 semicircles or 7 heaps above the line. That means the answer is positive 7. Pretty straightforward. Now let's take a look at it where we have a negative. We start with negative 4. That means we're going to put 4 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. What this symbolizes is you went outside in your yard and you dug 4 holes. Well, people come home and they say, hey, I'm not happy with that. We need to fill in 3 of them. So we need 3 piles of dirt. 1, 2, 3, and that's what represents the positive 3. Now when we take a look at this, notice that when you put a heap and a hole together, it makes 0. Think of it as I have a hole in the ground and I go out and I fill it in. Once I fill it in, I don't have a hole anymore, but I also don't have a pile of dirt sitting on top of the land. So what we can do is we can shade in 1, 2, 3. Notice that I didn't just X them out or I didn't shade them all together. I shaded them so I can still see each heap and hole together, each heap and hole individually, but I can also say, hey, together they're 0. I don't have to think about them. So now we note that we have 1 hole in the ground. We know that holes in the ground are negative, so the answer to negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Moving on to 4 plus negative 3. Starting out, we have 4 heaps. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We then go out and we're going to dig 3 holes. So directly under the semicircle, we have 1, 2, 3 holes that are dug in the ground. We know that when we put a heap and a hole together, a positive and a negative together, opposite signs together, they make a 0 pair, and if you look at it, you formed a circle. So we do some light, brief shading wherever we have those zeros, and we note that we have 1 left. That 1 is above, we have 1 heap, so the answer to 4 plus negative 3 is 1. Again, take a look at the second and third example. When we look at negative 4 plus 3, we had more negatives than we did positives. So it kind of makes sense that, oh, well, I have more negatives, so the answer has to be negative. And oh, with 4 plus negative 3, I have more positives, so I end up having more, so the answer has to be positive because I have more of them. Take a look at the last example, negative 4 plus negative 3. We start with negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 holes dug in the ground. And then we come around and we dig 3 more because of that plus negative 3. 1, 2, 3. We come around and we count that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 holes dug in the ground. Well, since they're dug in the ground, they're below the ground. That means they're going to be negative 7. Now let's take a look at the final modeling method, the number line. And you should note that the first step for modeling addition on a number line is to draw the number line. I've already done that for you in the book. You're welcome. So even though the first step says draw a number line, good news is that's already been done for you. So we start at 0. We draw an arrow above the number line to the first number, pointed to the right, and the negative to the left. So for the first one, we're going to start at 0, and we're going to go to negative 1. That means we go to the left 1. Now, starting where you stopped. This is a very important thing. You start where you stopped. A big mistake a lot of students make is they go back to 0. We don't want to go back to 0. We start where we stopped. This says, I went left 1, but then I added 3. So we're going to go 3 more. And you'll note that positives to the right, negatives to the left. If you need to write those words, positive to the right and negative to the left, please feel free as a way to remind yourself. So now we go to the right 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. And when we look, we note that we end up at positive 2. So the answer to negative 1 plus 3 is positive 2. Take a look at the second example. 1 plus negative 3. Once again, we note positive to the right, negative to the left. Starting out with positive 1, we start at 1 and we go to the right 1. We then want to add negative 3. Since it's a negative, we're going to start where we stopped and we're going to go back 3. 1, 2, 3. Note that where we ended up was negative 2. Therefore, the answer to 1 plus negative 3 is negative 2.